Welcome back to Hey Kentucky. Last night, you saw part one of my interview with Congressman Thomas Massie. Tonight, the conversation continues with more on his feelings about Governor Beshear's handling of the pandemic and his bid for re-election. So Governor Beshear did lay out his phased-in reopening approach. What do you make of it?
Well, we need to get things open again. So if he wants to open things up, let's open things up. We should have never shut them down to the degree we have. Look, the fact that he says we should reopen and we don't have herd immunity. In fact, we probably need like 80% of the people to have been exposed to the virus in order to get herd immunity, and we're not even up to 10% yet. That's an acknowledgement that the shutdown was too drastic in the beginning, because if he's saying go back to work and wear a mask, that should have been the message on day one.
Have you spoken privately or personally to President Trump since he made the comment that you should be thrown out of the Republican Party?
Well, I had a lot of people mad at me for saying that Congress should go to work. On March 27th, when they tried to stay home and eat ice cream and let Nancy Pelosi pass the bill with a telephone call, and I forced them to come to work, I said that if truckers, nurses, and grocery store workers have to come to work, then by golly, Congress should too. What you see now is you see the president, you see Mitch McConnell, you see all the Republican leaders now saying exactly what I said a month ago. So I feel very vindicated in that. And I've told the president through a message that I left at the White House that I have no hard feelings.
So in the midst of all of this, you are still having to run a campaign. Attorney Todd McMurtry, who is actually on our show, is your Republican challenger in the primary, which is coming up in June. Talk about how this whole election process is going to work out. And do you feel, a significant challenge from him at this time?
Well, his campaign's in shambles right now after his tweets became public. Here recently, he had some tweets that, for instance, Liz Cheney, who's the number 3 Republican in the House, who had been backing Todd McMurtry, and the Republican Jewish Coalition, who had been backing Todd McMurtry, they characterized these tweets as racist, and they've asked for their money back. So he's not been able to raise any money. We just passed the $1 million mark. My campaign has raised over $1 million this cycle, and we are winning in a poll that was released. We didn't do the poll. It's a public poll. 70-13 in this race. I think my opponent's going to have a really hard time connecting with people. In the beginning of the race, he didn't go to any of the functions. He didn't get out and go to the counties when he could. He's probably regretting that now, because it's hard for any of us to go out and meet people at this point.
How do you feel about the primary election in Kentucky going to be mostly by absentee ballot voting?
I do not like the mail-in ballot aspect of this campaign. I think it's ripe for abuse. Hopefully it won't be abused, but I think it's ripe for abuse. I don't think it will affect the outcome of my election. I think you may have people voting who've not participated before, but a lot of those folks may go off of name ID, in which case that advantages me in this race, but I prefer to have in-person voting. And I think if we're going to open the economy back up, if we're going to tell people they can go back to work, then we should open the polls back up.
Thomas Massie, is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about today?
That's about it. I just think Congress needs to get back to work. Let's go back up there. Instead of being last responders, we need to be first responders.
Let me ask you one more thing while I think of it here. I know you haven't, called it a hoax, but certainly on Twitter you had your murder hornets a tweet from the other day about wearing beekeeper suits and all of that. I just always struggle with who is benefiting from everything shutting down and people getting sick and all. Who is benefiting the people that don't think this is real and that we should be staying safe at home?
Well, I want people to stay safe. I think we should protect our elderly. I just tweeted an article that shows that in most states, most of the victims are actually in nursing homes, not at the beaches. And so instead of shutting the beaches down, we should be protecting the nursing homes. So I take this very seriously. But, you kind of have to laugh at some of the government responses to this. One week they say, don't wear a face mask. The next week they say, wear a face mask. One week they say, we don't want everybody tested. The next week they say, we're trying to get everybody tested. And so I think the governments in general have been inconsistent, but if you look at my social media and my messaging on this, I have been consistent. We need to let the free market solve these problems, and the government reaction has so far caused more harm than good.
Will you be wearing a mask?
I wore a mask in Congress because my colleagues asked me to. I don't wear a mask on the farm.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily necessary, right? We can go and take a walk and we don't need a mask on there. But when you are in large groups of people, you do wear a mask.
I think it's an individual decision, and I don't think that the government should be able to force that onto people. If it is something that we, as a society decide that we want or don't want, then it needs to be legislated. Frankly, if the governor wants to make some of these drastic changes to the way we conduct our everyday lives, he should call the legislature back in session and let everybody have a say in how these rules are implemented.
Now, there have been some legal challenges that have upheld against Governor Beshear, including the travel ban. That affects a lot of your constituents because of the proximity to Ohio.
Right. 14 of the 20 counties that I represent border Ohio, and I can guarantee you people are basically going back and forth every day between Ohio and Kentucky. I mean, you can't create some kind of artificial geographic barrier that people haven't seen in 100 years, because commerce has to continue. People still have to go to the grocery store. A lot of people in my district cross the river to get health care. So that boundary, the governor can like to think that we've got a big wall around the state, but we don't.
Our thanks to Thomas Massie for joining us. Still ahead on Hey Kentucky, we'll cover some more topics. That includes the possibility that a former UK quarterback commit could end up playing in the Bluegrass anyway. Stay with us.